Merkel Media.
This was all circulating around the base that a giant had been killed, but no one was supposed to talk about it.
I saw 3 long, bony fingers reach up underneath the door, curl up to grab it, and then disappear.
When he came over to me, dude, he slithered over to me.
And this giant comes out of the cave and they're all frozen. And he starts running and firing at this giant. Well, the giant moves. He's got a spear in one hand and he's running really fast and spears Dan and holds him up like this. Somebody yells, shoot him in the face, shoot him in the face. They basically decapitate him.
Got closer. When he got about 15 yards away from me, I raised that 12 gauge and I blowed his head off.
I feel something pulling at my leg, and I look over and there are 2 small gray entities pulling at me. And they're literally, I'm getting pulled off the bed.
I reached my hand into this bush and I touched air. Couldn't breathe and I couldn't move because I know I'm seeing a monster.
Welcome to the show, everybody. You're listening to the Confessionals podcast. I'm your host, Tony Merkel. Thanks for being here. If you have a crazy, wild experience you want to share with me on the show, go ahead and shoot me an email. My email address is contact@theconfessionalspodcast.com. That's contact@theconfessionalspodcast.com. Or go to the website, theconfessionalspodcast.com, hit the contact section, and you can reach me that way as well. Either way works for me, just get a hold of me. If you want more shows on a weekly basis, we got you covered. 2 places, the website and on YouTube. If you're on an iPhone and you're trying to become a member, you got to actually go to the channel itself, hit the link in the description, because for whatever reason, iPhone doesn't offer a join button like Android. That's the first time I've ever said that Android's better than iPhone, but it's true on this scenario. So if you're on iPhone, go to the YouTube channel, hit the link. If you're on Android, just hit the join button. But you can also go to theconfessionalspodcast.com/join, become a member there. You'll get access to bonus shows every Thursdays, the Tuesday shows ad-free, and overtime segments when they are available right there on the Confessionals app or on YouTube. Go ahead and check out merkelfilms.com. We have our documentaries there. We're coming out with our 3rd documentary very soon called Sasquatch and the Missing Man. And later this year, we're coming out with our very first movie called The Sasquologist. I know you're going to love it. It's hilarious. It's heartfelt. It's an awesome movie. I've seen it, and you're going to love it when it comes out right there on merkelfilms.com. All right, friends, listen, we have Fringe coming on the show, and Fringe reached out to me to talk to me about coming on her X space. I guess that's a thing. The space is on X, SpaceX. I just connected that dot. That's wild. Elon, you slick son of a gun. All right, she asked me to come on her X space, SpaceX, to talk about Dogman, and I went to her profile because I didn't know who she was, and it turns out she's an abductee, and she has ties to MK Ultra and My Labs. And I was like, this sounds like somebody that I want to talk to on my show. So I reached out to her and I said, how about we swap? And so she comes on today to talk about her experiences. She's had over 250 abductions. And through those abductions, she come to the understanding that these beings, entities, whatever they are, she believes are collecting the human soul to put them in hybrid bodies. And I know it sounds like a wild claim, but when you hear her talk and her experiences, you see the pathway of her to come to understanding that. So she comes on. This is a fantastic episode. Later today at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on her X Space, I'm going to be going live with her at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk about Dogman. She's calling it the Doom Room with Tony Merkel. So if you're free at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are going live on Fringe's X Space. Link is in the description of this episode. But until then, I hope you enjoy this conversation I had with her because it was a banger. All right, today we have Fringe on the show. Fringe, how are you?
I'm very well. Thank you very much.
Hey, listen, I told you before we started, I think the name Fringe is awesome, but I'm just going to let the people know it's not your legal name. Okay. So just in case they are wondering, how crazy would that be though, if somebody had a kid, named the kid Fringe, and they grew up doing what you do?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I knew a kid named Blaze when I was growing up.
yeah.
So it's not beyond the pale.
Yeah. Imagine if it was like Blade or something like that. That'd be kind of cool. So I want to let people know where they can find you right off the jump here. And we can talk about that a little bit before we get into the conversation. But you are somebody who is a lifelong abductee experiencer. This is in your bio on X, which is where people can find you. The website, it's still Twitter, by the way, which is interesting on the URLs, but twitter.com/fringe.com. Also, you can just do @fringe.com to find the bio. You are somebody who does a lot of X spaces talking to experiencers, and you personally have these experiences, MK Ultra, My Labs, and your focus is on raising awareness to this abduction phenomenon and the things that are intertwined with it. I read through some of your blog, and it's apparent to me that I would say you and I probably agree on a lot of these things, and from different perspectives in the sense that you're an experiencer. You have a lot of intimate knowledge here. And as somebody on my end of the screen who has built my experience through the eyes of others, I've come to a lot of similar conclusions as you. I'm very excited about having this open conversation with you. Before we get into your story and your experiences, how it all unfolded and how you kind of come to understand how that came to be for you, let's talk about the X though, because I think, letting people know where they can find you, but also the mission of what you're doing on X is, I think, important.
Yeah, so Twitter has built up a little community that I just joined it last year. It's been going for quite some time. We call it UFO Twitter. Some people will call it now UFO X, just because of the rebranding. But it's just a place where people interested in ufology and experiencers can come together. And we have a lot of spaces. People put out a lot of news. People are keeping up with topics like disclosure and that kind of thing. People are uncovering documents left and right out of the archives. And, it's a really great community full of a lot of information, and especially for experiencers. And there are a few of us, myself included, who put on spaces where experiencers can come in and join and go ahead and tell their stories. They're not going to be attacked. They just get to tell their story. If they want to answer questions, they can. And if they don't, that's fine too. And I think a lot of people just find it very therapeutic. This is what you're doing too, right? People are able to come in and tell this crazy story that sounds like science fiction that nobody is going to believe, but I'm going to believe them because it's happened to me. And there are several of me's in that community. So it's just an awesome place to come together. If people haven't found it yet, I highly recommend it. It basically saved my life, in the loose sense, at about this time last year, actually, maybe a couple months from now, this time last year.
That's wild. Yeah, I've had similar experiences where people will come and say the show is kind of, I don't want to say saved their life, but definitely has brought them out of loneliness, depression. We have had several people throughout the years that were listeners of the show commit suicide. And it's one of those things where you kind of take that to heart because you know what they've gone through, and then they're no more. And you knew they were struggling with suicidal things beforehand. And, I've also had people say that because of the show, it kept them from, killing themselves too. So I guess that is kind of like a similar thing. But this stuff is, I think, very important work. And I'm glad to see you doing it and thriving, by the way. You said my little small thing, but you have almost 6,500 people following you on X. So that means every time you're doing a space, they're made aware of that. And so I think that's a very good thing. It means it kind of mirrors as to what kind of work you're doing and the importance of it, that people find it worth following. So anybody who, after hearing this conversation, wants to go, or before, right now, actually, go ahead and follow her. Links are in the description of this episode. And like I said, it's pretty easy to remember, just @fringe.com, DOTCOM. And your website is fringethink.com too, which kind of has, it's like a blog, has your writings and stuff in there. And I found it very interesting. So with that said, I want to kind of dive into some of this stuff with you because it encompasses a lot. And when I started doing this podcast stuff, I came to a conclusion pretty early on that this stuff is intertwined. And a lot of times, especially back then, it's funny, like you say 7 years ago when I started the podcast 7 years ago, and in my head, I'm like, that's not that long ago. But so much has happened since 2017 in January. The way we think about things, the way we approach topics, just on this front, not to mention the world and things that have changed so much to change the landscape. But back then, I came to this understanding pretty quickly that I don't think when somebody is talking about a paranormal experience, let's just say the Hat Man, because I know you mentioned Hat Man a couple of times. I don't think that is a all exclusive club. I think sometimes people are experiencing things that are maybe results of other paranormal experiences that they're having. For instance, people talk about these Bigfoot encounters and these lights that pop up on these properties around the time of these encounters. Well, what's that about? Why are orbs popping up during these encounters that people are having? Not always. Why is it that, I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name. He's in Pennsylvania, though. He's been a researcher for years. Stan, can't think of his last name, but he made this connection back in, I think, the 60s that there was a lot of UFO encounters. But right around the same time, people were having encounters with Bigfoot. And it's like, why is that, you know? And I started connecting this dot that it's like, you know, I think this stuff might be intertwined, not always, but sometimes. And what does that mean, you know? And I think that your story kind of mirrors a lot of that. When people talk about MK Ultra, it's changing now, but there was a time that when people were talking about MK Ultra, the idea of abduction wasn't in the same conversation. And I think the more people like you come out and talk about this stuff, the more people are able to see how this stuff does intertwine and connect. So with that said, I want to let the audience know that you are a retired police officer. I think it was almost 25 years experience?
No, I did almost 20 years. But yeah, I think it gives me a little bit of perspective. I think it gives me a lot of life experience. And then I had a lot of investigative experience, and I was able to talk to a lot of people and just kind of suss things out and, you know, where's the actual truth in this 5-way story, you know, that kind of thing, I think really helped me figure out what was going on with me for sure. And then again, with the overall picture of everything that's going on.
Yeah. And I also think that it's worth mentioning about your husband too, and your relationship with him. Because maybe that's the 25. You guys have been married for 25, 26 years, something like that, right?
Yeah, we've been married 26 years in March. And then he did do 30 years at the same department. And we've had some experiences at the same time. So he has seen some of the creatures that I've seen during my experiences.
And so it's worth noting that because you have gone through life with somebody for such an extended period of time and shared experiences with each other, that, you know, at least on your end of the screen, you have somebody that can vouch for you, you know, and that you're comfortable with and you can relate with. So let's dive into this. At what point how did this story unfold for you to come to understand that there was something going on more than just what you thought was dreams? How did that kind of all start unfolding for you?
Well, I always knew, this is such a long story. So my very first experience, I was 3.5 years old. Typical aliens in the bedroom, in my doorway. I was paralyzed and frozen. I had another very strange experience with a very small green entity when I was a child. I had what I believe was probably a near-death experience when I was a child. And then my very first experience as more of an adult, I was a teenager, but an adult, it was during the day. And this is the first time I ever saw Hat Man. And now at that time, I didn't know he was Hat Man. He didn't have a name or anything. There was no internet, you know, there was no information out there as far as I knew, definitely none that had come to me. And that was the start of decades of experiences with what people now, they call them shadow people. This was a term coined by Heidi Hollis. I don't know if you've ever come across Heidi Hollis or had her on your show. She's fantastic. She's an experiencer. She actually had an experience with an entity who told her about shadow people. And it's a fascinating story. I've had her on Twitter. So I had decades of experiences with shadow people. And I also I can now look back and think of, many very anomalous experiences in my life, but never in my life did I connect it to anything to do with UFOs or aliens. So all of my experiences were very supernatural or paranormal is how I would characterize them. They were just normal for my life. It just is what it is. I just never thought a whole lot about it. I just knew I got attacked by these shadow people. They would get on top of me. They would paralyze me. It's extremely frightening. And then actually a little part of the story is when I was in my late 20s, I came across an article. And by the way, this also happens to my siblings and my mother as well. I came across an article telling me that what was happening to me, and this is actually when the internet finally had come out and there was some information out there, it was called sleep paralysis, and that these were just hallucinations. And I thought, oh my goodness, oh, thank goodness, it's a hallucination. This is fantastic. This is amazing. And all I have to do is lay there and just be very calm, and this will pass. And that moment in my life just really pisses me off because I just don't believe that anymore. But I think that information has now been given to so many people, and I think it's bad information. And I think it's hurt a lot of people. So I went the next couple of decades believing, and I even told my siblings, okay, listen, we don't have to worry about this thing that's happening to us. It's just a hallucination. It's science, it's all about the science. And so let's not worry about this. Let's just remain calm and just breathe through it and not worry about what's happening. And so I spent a long time doing that. And then, interestingly enough, I guess this happens to a lot of people. During the year of COVID, I was retired. And, like a lot of people, I found just a lot of time on my hands. It ended up, I'll try to make it a short story. My husband and I actually sold our house and left our family, and we moved out of state. And it was just me and him all of a sudden. We came from a decently large family. I was always the matriarch type of the family, all the events at my house, very much the caretaker, taking care of everyone. We moved out of state, and now it's just me and him. And I started looking into some of these things that had been happening to me. I've always, since I was a kid, I've always astral traveled, gone out of body. I've always been a lucid dreamer. And then I've always had these shadow people after me. But at that point, I thought it was sleep paralysis. And so I start I don't know what happened, but I think this happens a lot to people. People either retire or they just get a little older and they kind of just start reflecting on their life. And so I start reflecting and I realize, you know what? In the last couple years, I haven't been going out of body too much. And I haven't been lucid dreaming too much. I wonder what's going on. And so one of the very first tips I read online was start writing down your dreams. And it sounds maybe a little silly, but what that actually does is it connects the right and the left brain into a communication. So I started writing down my dreams. And right away, I thought, there's some really wild stuff happening here. I don't really want to write this. I wouldn't want anybody to find this, what I'm dreaming about. And at that time, I'm dreaming about being on spaceships and hybrid children and medical exams and just all this stuff. And then the more I was writing down my dreams and really paying attention, I just started becoming more and more lucid. And I kind of just retrieved the lucidity that I thought I had always had for most of my life. And I started realizing that these were not dreams. And this was a process. This took, in the last 2.5 years, I've had approximately 250 encounters with what we call the phenomenon. And that's going to be everything from abductions, physical abductions. There's astral or soul abductions. There's this virtual reality thing they do, and downloads and attempts at abduction, because the end of my story is me actually going through about the last year trying to stop this. And so I become more and more lucid, and I start waking up while these things are happening, waking up as awake as I am right now talking to you during this interview. And I start realizing that I'm not dreaming. I'm awake. I'm here. I'm awake. This is happening. What is going on? And during this time, there was a heavy emphasis on these medical procedures and female related procedures. And TMI, but I'm 55. And at this time, I had already gone through the change of life. There was no way I could be pregnant. And it took me a long time to say, this makes no sense. What are they doing? I'm too old for this. There's no way this is actually real, what's happening. And I actually pushed it off for a very long time. I didn't really want to wrap my mind around it. And I was just kind of in denial, because it didn't make sense to me that I could be this age and they could be using me for these things that are reproductive related. It just made no sense. It just wasn't logical to me. And so I really pushed that off, and I just thought, this can't be happening. And then as time went on, and I just became more and more lucid, and at this time last year, March or so of last year, I was waking up to 100% consciousness during these procedures, and some that were not procedures. And so I was really pushing back on this, what they were doing. Anytime I would wake up, I was actually fighting, physically fighting with them, being uncooperative, just being very disruptive to the system. And it all kind of culminated in about March or April of last year with some extremely negative experiences that were sexual violations. And I'll just leave it at that. And I won't go into details about that. But what happened was, as I slowly realized, I wrapped my mind around what was happening. Gosh, there's so much more to this story. I thought these were aliens. I thought they were our space brothers. I thought they were maybe doing something to help themselves genetically to reproduce. And, I thought they were ETs from outer space. And I spent a very long time believing this. And so when I really started waking up and started paying attention, and again, I'm writing down everything now, and I'm looking for patterns and seeing what's happening. And in about October of 2022, I realized that they are very interested in the soul, in my soul specifically. And now I know other souls as well. And that just made me say, wait a minute, why would extraterrestrials from outer space who might need help, with their genetic hybrid breeding programs be interested in my soul? And I can say it to your audience. I truly appreciate your audience, Tony, and you, because everything I'm going to say today sounds like science fiction, but anyone who's willing to entertain science fiction type stories, with an open mind, I really appreciate, because, by the way, as you probably already know, this is coming mainstream. People are going to be talking about this stuff at the dinner table very soon. So I realize they are transferring my soul out of my body. I'm being put into other bodies. I'm being put into sometimes a computer interface. I'm being put into what feels like a portal, which I know sounds insane. And I start realizing, wait a minute, there's more going on here. This isn't just about this reproductive thing that they have going on, which, by the way, I was in denial about because I'm way too old for that anyway. And so all these things just kind of come together. And I've been a Christian my whole life. And I feel like I was born a Christian, just always have been. And through most of my adult life, I was actually what's called a Calvinist. I was just very strict and very Matter of fact, God's will is sovereign. I was chosen before the foundations of the earth. I am saved, come hell or high water, basically. And you couldn't have convinced me otherwise, for all the money in the world, for my own soul, for anything. I'm totally rambling here. So I'm going to go back. The first time I heard Ray Boucher talk about aliens being related to demons, I thought he was completely insane. I thought he was just very silly. And I kind of characterized him as just an, church boomer who really didn't have a wide view of the world. And I very much dismissed it. I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. And so even though I'm a Christian, I think it's important for the audience to understand, I thought these were our space brothers. I thought they were aliens. The first several times I heard of this connection between aliens and demons, I thought it was absolutely ridiculous. And so after that time, I realized they're transferring my soul. And I just start trying to think for myself and say, okay, what's actually happening here? I end up in October of 2022, completely disconnecting from religion, completely disconnecting from Christianity. Because the short story is, I realized there's a lot more going on in this world than I have been told by the church. And I felt very betrayed by the church, by the way, which is a whole other story. And I went into a total crisis, which is just a whole other long story. And so I disconnect from religion and I decide I cannot just believe in this thing because I've been told this my whole life. Do I believe it because it's true, or do I believe it because it's something that was basically I was brainwashed into for my whole life? So I did that. And I went through October to about March of last year, just really looking at my experiences, trying to pay attention when I'm in their environment. What are they doing? What's happening? What are their motives? And this is a very telepathic environment. And I just started coming away with just a knowing of what their agenda was and what they were all about. And again, to go back a little bit, I start really pushing back. I'm being disruptive and I'm causing a problem. And so just to make this a very short story, even though I have been rambling, is...
No, just, you're fine. You're fine. the people are here to hear you talk. So you don't apologize for that. You're doing fine.
Well, it can get confusing because I'm talking kind of all over the place, and it's not confusing when I tell it in the proper order, but that's not happening. And so in about March, April of last year, I had come to this time where it seemed like I had been kicked up the food chain and I was severely punished. And at this time, I had also started talking to some other people and saying, hey, this is what, I don't think that this is what's going on. I think there's a whole other agenda here. Like there's something else going on besides this. I was not in contact with any UFO people. I had not read any of the material. I had no knowledge of any of the abduction material, but I had reached out to a couple of researchers and said, hey, this is what's happening to me. I don't understand it. What's going on? And so again, this whole big picture comes together. I end up being severely punished. It was like a psychological torture type thing when they did these things to me. So this was March, April of last year. I went through an entire Nightmare on Elm Street situation where I ended up terrified to go to sleep. I used to look around the room and get jealous of people who could just, go to sleep, because I knew the second I went to sleep, I was in their territory, and I, who knows what they were going to do. I spent 7 months of last year sleeping in a helmet made of Velostat. It's not a Faraday type material, but it's the type of material that can thwart some types of technology. And so during this time, I start realizing too that this is not supernatural, by the way. It's not what I would call supernatural or magic. I start realizing that this is actually technology, which is very interesting. And so I had gotten in touch with someone who told me, hey, try this. And so I slept in a Velostat helmet for 7 months. It's hideous. You could probably see pictures of it on Twitter. I was pulling out everything I could possibly think of, reaching out to everyone and their mother, trying to get a remedy for this. Because in my head, I know it's technology, so there must be a type of technology that can stop it. And so I did everything. I did the helmet, I did scalar waves, I was using iron, any type of crystal you can imagine, organite. I was wearing a Fitbit. I had an AirTag. I slept with an AirTag for quite some time. And so I spent most of all of last year trying to stop the interference that I was having. Because when they did what they did to me in March of last year, it was terrifying. And I just promised myself, I can never go back there again. Like, I cannot let this happen. To kind of back up a little bit, I had gotten to the point during these abductions that I was actually looking forward to the challenge. Because I thought, if you're going to rip me out of my bed at night, just bring it. And I was very disruptive and very, just very rebellious. And so I went from that attitude, like that warrior mentality, to God, please don't ever let this happen to me again. This is so horrible what they did. So I'm doing all these remedies and I'm trying to disconnect from this thing. In the meanwhile, I did almost a prodigal son type journey. So I was betrayed by the church. I just thought nobody prepared me for this. And by the way, to this very day, the worst haters on me are Christians. Because Christians are telling me, if you were saved, this wouldn't be happening to you. If you had enough faith, this would not be happening to you. And so I actually went through this whole period where I went from being a Calvinist, like I've been saved from the foundations of the world, to I'm not even a child of God. I have no faith. I'm not even saved, because this is happening to me. And so, and I'm kind of still struggling with that, by the way. So that's really important, I think, too. If anyone can pull anything out of this, these things care about genetics and bloodlines. And while I have heard of many instances where the name of Jesus can stop abductions, it has never worked for me, all the way from the shadow people when I was younger to now. It has never once worked. And I think it's really important for especially Christians to understand that I can promise you from my 20s to my 50s, it was not a lack of faith that did that. And so that's another kind of part of the story too, that I struggle with. If you just had enough faith, this wouldn't be happening. If you just believed in Jesus, this wouldn't be happening. Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. All right. Well, I've been rambling for a minute. There's so much more to this story than just kind of trying to wrap it up in a little package.
No, there's so much. And I know it's hard because everything can take you down a rabbit hole.
Yep.
And so it's like, at what point do you try to pull the brakes on this rabbit hole, come back so we can go down another path? I understand. What I will say is this. So you and I kind of laid the foundation between each other before we started recording, and you know that I'm a Christian. And one thing that, because I've heard the same thing. I mean, so when people say to me, what do I do? I'm like, the only thing I feel comfortable telling you is to rebuke in the name of Jesus. I'm not going to tell you to go and do a seance and try to plead with the spirit to stop coming, but I'm in the moment drawing an extreme blank, but I think it was Daniel, where he was praying and it took the angel 21 days to come and answer the prayer. And in that process, the angel, when he arrived, said, I would have come sooner, but he was warring with I forget if there was an entity actually named there, but it wasn't until Michael came to help him in this battle that he was able to be freed up to go and answer Daniel's prayer. So
Wow.
for 21 days, Daniel was actually praying for an answer that wasn't coming. And it was actually because of the spiritual warfare and the spiritual realm and what's going on there that actually delayed the angel. And I think about that in these kind of situations when I hear that, because I think that could be a very real possibility with sometimes when people are calling and they're not getting the answer they need, not want, but need. There's a real spiritual warfare. There's a spiritual realm that's happening around us, and we're not always privy to understand what's happening in the moment. But as a Christian, I've been called to pray and continue and pray without ceasing. And so that's what I do. And so anyways, I just kind of wanted to say that to you, because I don't know if you've ever considered that, but maybe there is something, because I know you've considered the spiritual warfare. I know that there's a spiritual warfare going on here with this, and that might be part of it. And so take it for what it is. So your childhood was anything but ordinary. And it's something that I think maybe we should backtrack to, because maybe there's foundational things there that lead us to where we are today. I don't know, but I believe you were immediately at birth put into foster care, correct?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah.
To get back to your story about the angel, that's pretty incredible. And to kind of wrap up that side for me, as this is all going on and I realize they're transferring my soul, and I realize this is spiritual warfare and this is so much more than what it appears to be on the surface. There is some type of cosmic battle going on between the light and the darkness. And I think that I had to go through this journey on my own and like come out the other side and make my own choice. Does that make sense? Because this is something that I had been raised in, right?
It's not very Calvinist of you, by the way.
It's not. And you know what? I can't even say I'm a Calvinist anymore. I don't know if you ever got to my blog, but I actually have some very different views now on the whole thing that we don't need to get into. But I think
feel like you and I are setting ourselves up for multiple conversations.
Oh,
we're 33 minutes into this, and I'm having a delightful time.
And I still haven't gotten anywhere. I've just been.
I know.
I haven't even put. I have this whole picture on my mind that I could put together and tie a neat bow on it, but it never goes that way. So I think I had to go on this journey by myself and make my own choice alone. It's so weird. I had to go from, okay, this was how I was raised, and I know this 100%. And I'm telling you, I thought you could never come up with anything that could challenge my faith. You couldn't. It's impossible. Okay, well, it happened. And so here I am. So it was very interesting to be in the environment, realize that there was a whole lot more going on that was happening on the surface. This is definitely a cosmic battle. It's crazy cosmic battle. It's a battle for the soul, period. It is. It's 100%. A lot of people in ufology do not want to hear this. They don't want to hear about religion. They do not want to hear about anything, they call it the woo. Anything to do with spirituality. But what's very interesting is when experiencers are given the opportunity to speak without being funneled down the appropriate or the accepted narrative, many of us will tell you the very same thing. And if you look at the abduction research, which, by the way, I came across in about March or April of last year, I started looking at the abduction research and realizing all these people out there, they're saying so much of the same thing that I said, that was happening to me. And it was very validating. So I went through this very dark period. I kind of came to all of these loosely held but conclusions on my own. And then I come to find the abduction research, and I start seeing everything that's been happening to so many people out there. There are millions of people this is happening to. and nobody quite understands that. So yeah, I was sent into foster care. It was just a short time, but nobody right now even knows where I was for about the first 6 weeks. When we get into the
Are you saying there's no record of it?
I'm sure there is, but just talking to my foster mother, who became my grandmother, it's a whole story. Talking to my mom, I went somewhere for 6 weeks, just immediately out of the womb. She didn't hold me or anything. And then I ended up in a second foster family. That foster family was told I was deaf, I was blind, and I was allergic to everything. So they were given a baby there was something very wrong with. And they thought I was like a deaf mute type, just, not ever going to progress in life. And I bring that up, or you brought it up. And if we're going to talk about my labs later, there are some very interesting threads when it comes to abductees. There's just a lot of commonalities. One of them is a family in the military, family in an intelligence unit, a family in any of these Raytheons or, stuff like that, JPL. And so I ended up looking into, just really trying to wrap my mind around my own history. Because there are a lot of abductees who are my lab's abductees. They know what program they were in. They remember going to special schools. They remember being tested. They remember their IQ being tested. And there's a gal I do spaces with. She knows she was in Stargate, and she knows she was in Project Looking Glass. She knows this. She has memories of people in military uniforms. She can give you names of some high-level people who are still out there right now today. Matter of fact, one of those names is pushing for disclosure right now. And this name was actually running her project. And so it's very incestuous. So yeah, I really looked into my history and trying to find out how I got involved in this, because so many abductees who are, they're also my labs. I think it's maybe 40 or 50% of alien abductees are my labs abductees as well. So I had always heard these stories kind of, growing up, but maybe about a year and a half ago, I started writing to my mom and my dad, and my grandparents, unfortunately, are passed, but, trying to figure out what happened. How did this happen? What's going on? How did I get involved in this stuff? Because there is an MK Ultra component to my abductions, and that's, again, a whole other story. So yeah, it turned out that my foster mother ended up being my grandmother. So my foster mother's son married my mother, and he became my adopted father. So my foster mother went against the rules, and she was letting my mother come visit me. And
your biological mother?
My biological mother, and that's how that all happened. And then to get to my biological mother has seen the Hat Man. I would let her tell her own story, but she had a mantid in her bedroom 4 or 5 nights ago. So this is very generational. It runs in families. I could try to make this story pretty short. When I was in my 30s, I ended up finding my biological father. My biological father and that entire side of my family, to my aunts, to my grandmother, to my grandfather, uncles, they were all involved in a human trafficking ring. And they were doing rituals. They were trafficking to definitely some very high names. One of these names was in the United States Senate up until she died very recently. And come to find out, he was involved with entities as well. He was being levitated in his backyard. He was in a kind of a so-called relationship with, he calls it Denino. It's Denino de Atocha. And he's also seen the lady. I don't know if you've heard the lady. She's attached to the Bledsoe case.
Yeah.
She kind of shows herself as like a Mary figure. In the Bledsoe case, she said she was Hathor, from, I believe, an Egyptian god. I think that's what she told him. So come to find out in my 30s that my biological side of my family was very much involved in the occult, human trafficking, rituals. There was a moment when I was meeting up with my biological father just to get to know him before I was aware of a lot of this stuff. And there was a moment when he admitted to me that he was going to kill me that day because I was a reptilian. And so that, at that time, I didn't even know what a reptilian was. I had no idea what a reptilian was. I hadn't heard any of these conspiracy theories. I had no idea, about the ritual sacrifice, abuse, all of that kind of stuff. I had no idea about it. I came to know about it from him. And so he was involved in some very unsavory activities, to say the least. And I've spoken now to some researchers who are convinced that that's where this is coming from. So I have dealt with some very demonic entities, not just your typical gray alien, very demonic entities. And they end up thinking they have an ownership over you. And it's basically, it's almost like being sold to the entity through the parent. And it's just, there's a lot of weird stuff that is involved in these things. But I also have it on my mother's side too. So that's what's interesting. It's on both sides of my family. So both sides of my family are dealing with these entities.
Interesting. Recently, you're catching me in a moment in time where I'm being pulled so many different directions with different stories that I'm looking into. I'm having in the moment a hard time remembering which story is which. But I believe, in fact, no, I know now. I just started reading a book called He Set the Captives Free. Have you ever heard of it?
No, I haven't, but I'll write it down.
I highly encourage you to read this book. And this is a book that came up on an interview I did last week. The audience listening right now will already know the story because it'll have aired already. But long story short, I interviewed a pastor in California last week, and his story is basically he was raised in a Pentecostal environment, was a pastor, he believed it, but never really saw supernatural things happening. And he gets thrusted into this spiritual warfare. He didn't understand what was happening, but he ultimately, Anton LaVey, do you know who that is?
I've heard the name, but I don't know what it means or who it is.
He's basically the father of the Church of Satan in America.
Oh yeah, with Aquino.
Yeah. Now that's a name I'm not totally familiar with, but LaVey, his whole family, it was involved. Well, LaVey's one daughter came into this pastor's church, and long story short, he winds up taking her into his home and ultimately adopting her. She was running from this, and it entered into this whole supernatural spiritual warfare going on. And in leading up to that, a spiritual father, a spiritual mentor of his came to him and said, "You have spiritual warfare coming your direction. God told me, and you need to read this book." And he gave him the book, He Set the Captives Free. And he never paid mind to it. 8 years goes by, and the guy calls him up again and says, "Hey, listen, he's a missionary in Chile. He said, I'm coming to the States. I'm coming to visit you tomorrow. I know you haven't read the book. God told me it's happening in a week from now. And you have been incredibly irresponsible." And it did. It started in a week. That a week later, she came into the church. And so I say this because I hear him tell this whole story for 2 hours. And the whole time I'm thinking, I have the book, He Set the Captives Free, sitting on my nightstand for like the last 2 years, and I haven't touched it. And it's in the last 2 years, I've been feeling God preparing me for some strong spiritual warfare. And I didn't understand where it was coming from. and just 1 + 1 = 2 still, I think. I have to check with the powers that be. But, I think I'm meant to read the book. And it's interesting because here we are a week later. I'm in the middle of reading. I haven't even got halfway in the book. But in this book, it lays out this story. It's a true story where this woman who is a devout Christian starts working in a hospital that she just feels a lot of spiritual oppression. And she comes to find out that there's a huge coven of witches and warlocks and Satanists that operate within the community and the hospital. And the first chapter is her laying her story out of how she came to understand this, and they inflicted sickness on her because of her spiritual warfare against them as she found out what was going on. And then the second chapter shifts to a whole new character, and it shifts to a character of the head witch in that area and how her story develops. And spoiler alert, I'm pretty sure, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure in the end, she probably comes to Christ. But it starts from the beginning. And her story is that, man, this is a really long way of getting to the point. But her story is that at birth, she had physical abnormalities. And a nurse came to her and said that if she would sell her daughter's blood to her, she could guarantee her daughter's medical treatment. And it turns out that the selling of that blood was to this satanic coven, and they followed through. But through this transaction, I gather it opened up her to a whole world of demonic oppression, possession, giving her abilities that she never understood growing up as a child until she later connected with this group of people who came basically to claim what that was theirs, because there was a contract involved. And she winds up, and I'm in the middle of her telling her story of how she became part of this coven, a very powerful coven, and worked her way up to becoming the head of it. And it all started at birth. And it started because of what her mother did at birth. And I'm just like hearing you talk, and I'm thinking, could there have been something that your father did, or your mother, or both, with your dad doing the human trafficking? That's something that is so common with this stuff, the human trafficking side of the abduction stuff. And then the rituals that you said that he was doing, I don't know the details, but could there have been some kind of contractual agreement with dark entities over your life that has brought you to this point where you're still trying to find out what is what? And you're on track. I really believe you're on track. And I'm not winding this down, by the way. But I really believe that you're on track with the spiritual warfare side of things. And I think the more you come to understand it and clarity and start thinking of things, the more the spiritual warfare is going to kick up, but also the closer you are to the finish line, I believe. So I say all that, and I'm going to lay it over to you. What do you say?
I say that I think you're absolutely correct. There's people who research this stuff, and the first thing this gal said to me was, "This is from your biological father." And now, abductions do run in families. It's generational. They are interested in bloodlines and genetics, and these are bloodlines they have been cultivating for at least several decades, maybe for much, much longer, perhaps, thousands of years. And so there is a generational component to it. But the overlap between the spiritual side, the paranormal type side, and the alien abduction side, it's extraordinary and very much underappreciated. And people do not want to put these two things together. It's all the same thing. These things are all on the same team. They're all working, together for each other. If you talk to Heidi Hollis, well, let me back up. It took me until I was about 54 years old, when I was waking up and just being completely conscious. They got to where I was conscious and they were trying to come get me. It actually got to where they were trying to come get me during the middle of the day while I was wide awake. I've actually had a couple of very strange incidents during the middle of the day. People like to say, "Oh, this is just a dream," or, this is just some strange psychological happening, and that's just simply not true. But where was I going with that? Oh, completely lost track of where I was going. Hopefully you were paying attention.
I was paying attention.
You were drinking coffee.
Yeah, no, I was paying attention.
The warfare. Yeah, the spiritual warfare and the overlap. So people do not want to understand. So they want to believe that these things are aliens from outer space, that they're extraterrestrial. And I can just tell you what I believe. I can't say that this is 100% true or with 100% certainty, but I can just tell you what I believe. I do not believe they're from outer space. I think they're from right here. I think they have been here for a very long time. I think the Greys are like a biological android that are hybrids probably themselves. They were created to interact with us. Behind the Greys, you have the Mantids and the Reptilians. They're actually kind of more in charge of the whole abduction show, and it's their sole purpose is this hybrid breeding program. And behind them, you get straight demons. And people will come into my spaces and go, "What do you mean a demon? What's a demon? This and that." They don't want to even believe there's any good or evil anymore. People cannot understand that the demons are actually in the hierarchy on the negative side of this phenomenon. There are demons. And by the way, there are beings much stronger than demons. I've only encountered one of them. The power from this being was unspeakable. So there are beings that are even higher up this food chain than demons. And I don't know what's after that. But I think that these, the aliens, for lack of a better term, were created to more easily interact with us. Because this is a very physical phenomenon. These are physical spaceships. They come get physical bodies. They are taking physical eggs and sperm. They are making physical hybrid beings who will be capable and are capable of living on the planet. So they have an entire agenda. And it can be very difficult to understand. Well, why does a demon need a spaceship? Well, a demon doesn't need a spaceship, but a demon cannot interact with us very easily at all. And so I believe these creatures were made, they are nuts and bolts creatures, even though they are very metaphysical. They're able to phase in and out of these dimensions, for lack of a better term. And I think they are here to do the interaction with us and to carry out whatever this agenda is. They tell us what the agenda is, by the way. I don't know if we can believe what they're saying, but they're creating these hybrids to seed them on the planet and usurp humanity on the planet. In the meanwhile, you have this very strange spiritual warfare going on through these beings. It was through these beings that I realized, what are they doing with my soul? How do they have the power to take my soul out of my body and to put it somewhere else? And that is a very frightening thing. That is what made me question my faith, question Christianity. Wait a minute, how can this being, and it's technology that they're using technology to remove me from my own body. That is something that should be the purview of God himself, right? But no, these beings are able to do it. And so that is a whole other rabbit hole that I'm not sure you want to go down. But
I want to go down at all. Like I don't want to. I just got to tell you that everything you're saying is resonating to me. Like everything. So the idea of these beings be able to pull your soul out of your body, if we look at it in a different lens, through practical means that everybody listening to the show has heard of, and I'm sure you have, astral projection. That's something that you choose to, well, not always, but that's something that people can choose to do. They practice it. They try to become in the astral plane. And one of the things they talk about is how they can choose to leave their body and go back into their body. So if you as an individual can do that, and theoretically God can do everything, Could there be dark forces? Let's just say you're not a dark person choosing to do that, and there's God who is ultimately able to do anything. Could there be dark forces out there that are very powerful? Yes, we've established that. Could they have the ability to do that as well? Why couldn't they? Why couldn't they? Especially when we're talking about fallen angels and these beings who have been around since creation. They watched it happen. They saw how God did these things, and then they rebel. Like, why wouldn't they have the ability to do that? And then you were talking about the hierarchies. Like, there's hierarchies with order, but there's also hierarchies within this side of things. Like, there's, say, just simple terms, good and evil. On the evil side, there are separate hierarchies. Who in the world can put a whole prison of inmates into one room and say, guys, get along and figure it out? It doesn't happen. And so within that realm, there are hierarchies of warring fractions. They're on the same team, as in we're against the big guy, but I am better than you. No, you're not. I'm better than you. There's definitely that. And that filters into people's experiences. And so I don't know where I went with that. I'm super ADHD, but you said something, I interrupted you, and I'm sorry.
Don't be sorry. I get tired of rambling. I'm just pulling things from so many places. This is not a coherent story, and I apologize for that. You totally nailed it. So I look at it, I liken it, of course, from the job to a drug cartel. You know, you have the head of the cartel, like Juan Pablo, and then you've got your shot caller who's in some prison in Central California. And you've got 50 gangs underneath that shot caller, and they're all trying to move dope money and guns, and a lot of times human trafficking as well. And they can be rival gangs. They can shoot at each other. You know, they can try to take each other over. But the bottom line is they all have the same agenda, and that is to make money and to move the dope money and guns.
Yes.
And so it's very much like that. And I think that's why there's a lot of confusion. It took me a while to realize I had 2 or 3 different things going on with different creatures, maybe with different modus operandi. It's just, and it can be very confusing. But that's the thing that people will not, and these people in ufology, no matter how many times they are told, this is spiritual warfare. This has to do with the ultimate destiny of the human soul. That's it. That's the game. That's what they're here for. Well, what does an alien have to do with the destiny of a human soul? Well, I don't know. Why are they taking my soul out of my body? What are they doing? Why are they threatening insiders? These so-called high-level insiders will go to their deathbed before they will give up information, because they are being told that these so-called aliens have control over the afterlife. And I can tell you, I have witnessed part of this process myself. And so it's downright frightening. And this is what just ripped my whole worldview out from under me when I realized that these creatures abducting me out of my body, able to transfer my soul, also working on this hybrid breeding program. You know, what does all of this have to do one with the other? It just, I mean, it almost killed me when I just went, what the ever-loving hell is going on in this world right now? I was not prepared, you know, for everything I saw and everything I went through.
Yeah, man, I can imagine. So you kind of mentioned here a little bit ago about the hybrids to usurp humanity. I'm tracking with you. I would like for you to maybe go into that a little bit more as far as your perspective as to how that unfolds, why, just in general, go into it more, because that was a statement I think the audience might have caught their ear and would like for you to maybe go into detail a little bit more on that angle of things.
Yeah, sure. So again, this is happening over a period of a couple of years, and maybe about this time last year, October or so of 2022, I'm really putting this all together, and I'm realizing, oh my gosh, what's actually happening and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just almost absorbing information, because I can't say the aliens told me. You're going to hear abductees. You probably already have. I don't know how many abductees you've talked to, or if or who's been on your show.
Healthy amount.
A lot.
Yeah, there's been a healthy amount. Yeah.
A lot. Okay. So you're going to have abductees telling you, oh, they told me this or they told me that. That does not happen with me. I have just been in their environment so many times. And I say everything they do is a double-edged sword. They took me so many times that all I had to do was start paying attention. And it's a very telepathic environment. And part of what I was being tested and trained for was to actually conceal my own thoughts and intentions from them. I was actually being trained for that and tested for it. And so being in a telepathic environment, they're trying to hide themselves from me as well. And just being there too many times and really started paying attention, I'm now absorbing this stuff. They have never told me this. So I end up coming out March or April with my own ideas on what was going on. I start coming across the abduction research in about March or April of last year. And I think the very first thing I read was by Carla Turner, and it was called Masquerade of Angels. I'm not sure if you've ever heard of the abductee, Ted Rice, but he's fantastic. He's in his 80s now. I start reading this story, and I'm basically reading my life. Like everything that was happening to me, I'm now reading in this story. And he's going down to some descriptions of things that happened to me that you cannot know unless you've seen it or unless you've been there. And so I start reading the abduction research, and I start realizing, oh my gosh, these people are saying the exact same thing of these conclusions that I have already come to. And so most abductees, and not all, but most of the abductees have used hypnotic regression to recover memories. Because many abductees were given these screen memories. It's something like 85% of abductees return with the thinking that they're on a spiritual journey and that this is maybe a good thing, and we're just helping them with their genetics and all this kind of stuff. They feed, maybe a dozen different, it's propaganda stories to abductees as to why they're doing what they're doing and why they're doing it in secret, by the way. And so much of the abductee research from Carla Turner and David Jacobs has been done on abductees who have received hypnotic regression. I have never retrieved a memory through hypnotic regression. So when I'm talking about any of my experiences, I wake up and there I am. Sometimes I'm having, maybe a 50 to 75% degree of consciousness, and it can go up to 100%. And by the way, it's not like a dream. It's much more like being under anesthesia. And so I'm going to write this down so I don't forget where I was actually going down this rabbit hole. So they're using mind control, and it's got to be the same portion of the brain that anesthesia targets because it's very similar. So the way it feels is let's just say that you're going to get a tooth pulled. And if you've ever had maybe a Valium or something to go for some type of daytime surgery, they want to give you something to kind of calm you down while you're walking in. They might give you a Valium or a Xanax or something. So you can be walking into the dentist office with just under a little bit of haze. You're going to get a tooth pulled. You really don't want to be there. You don't want to get a tooth pulled, but you have to do it because it's for your own good. And so you get into the dentist chair and they probably load you up with a greater amount of anesthesia. And then imagine that anesthesia just running through you maybe a little bit too quick, or they didn't give you quite enough. And you actually wake up with the dentist pulling your tooth. That's pretty much how it goes for me. And interestingly enough, there's going to end up being a correlation between people who run through anesthesia very quickly, because I do in 3D real life, I run through anesthesia very quickly, and people who are able to wake up and kind of break out of their mind control. And so it's very similar. It's not like a dream. And a lot of people will report things like dreams because there's no other language for it. And when I'm not 100% conscious, it can feel very much like I've taken a Valium and I'm walking to the dentist chair. And so abductees in general are filled with screen memories, and they're filled just with things that didn't actually happen. And so many abductees have gone for hypnotic regression. There is some controversy over this. If you don't have the right regressionist, they can fill you with all kinds of nonsense that maybe didn't actually happen. So it's very controversial, and it's why I've never done it. However, it's very important to note that when I started reading the abduction research, what they were saying was matching up with what I had already kind of come to my own loosely held conclusions, because I'm not sure there's 100% in this field. And so what they, the aliens, the so-called aliens, are telling abductees, and these, again, memories are covered almost always under hypnotic regression, is that these hybrids are being made to replace us, Homo sapiens sapiens. They're going to replace us. And I'm going to tell you my own conclusions. So my own conclusions during this time is that they were trying to find a combination of gray alien and human DNA that can still be telepathically controlled, because they're all kind of hooked up into this hive mind control system. You can't have your own independent thought. It's very difficult for them to hide any thoughts from each other. It's almost like an AI computer system or something. And so they're looking for the combination of human and gray alien. And in my opinion, they're looking for the combination that can still house a human soul. And so this is a very delicate process. It has taken many, many years. In the very beginning of this process, they were not very successful. The young were not thriving. They were not making it. And so it has taken decades. People like to ask me, well, if they wanted to take us over, they would have done it a long time ago. Well, no, they wouldn't have, because they couldn't. But that's what they're working toward. And so the whole idea is to replace almost all humans, the majority of humans, with hybrids. And these hybrids are much more easily controlled than we are. And they're basically breeding out the human spirit, love, empathy, our desires for freedom, our desire for autonomy, our desire for God. They're breeding that out. And so imagine how long it would take and how many times it would take to find these exact perfect genetic matches to get what they want. And what they want, it almost seems like, okay, I'm just going to tell you what I think they're doing. I'll spit it out. So what I think they're doing is, I think they're trying to trap the human soul inside these hybrid bodies. And so if you believe in reincarnation, that might be one thing. If you don't believe in reincarnation, it doesn't really matter. Our souls come from somewhere, and they are put into our bodies. And the soul has to genetically match the body. I don't understand the science behind that, but it's what I've read researchers tell me this. There has to be a genetic match between the soul and the physical body. And so if they can develop a hybrid that has enough human DNA that can still seat the human soul, but yet still be controlled, 100% controlled by them, they have developed an ultimate soul trap, because that soul will never search for God. It will never feel love. It will never have human empathy. Because look, people like to talk about humans, right? We are capable of absolute atrocity, but we are also capable of great love. I mean, think about the humans out there who would give up their very last meal or their last shirt. The people out there will give up their last meal for a dog, let alone a fellow human being. Well, these aliens, that's not them at all. And so they're very hive-minded. When you get up to the mantid level, they're sociopathic. And so this is what I think they're doing. This is what I think they're looking for. I think it's very dark. I think they want to trap the human soul inside these hybrid bodies. And so I'm rambling again, but I start coming across the abductee research, and I realize, oh my gosh, they're telling abductees what they're doing. And they're telling abductees that they want hybrids on the planet. By the way, abductees are actually favored above humans. There's a little hierarchy there. You have the gray, you have the mantid, reptilian, the gray, and then you have abductees. and then you have humans, and humans are the very last on the totem pole. They don't care about humans. The only thing they care about humans is as a breeding stock in case anything goes wrong with this hybrid breeding program. They're going to keep a select amount of humans around, and if you're lucky, you have the right genetics, that's fantastic, and if you're not, you're not.
That goes into the depopulation idea then too.
Oh, it's all the same agenda, Tony.
Yeah.
It's all the same agenda. So if you want to look, if you really want to go down the conspiracies, the aliens are the physical component of what's dealing with us. But behind the aliens are these hyperdimensional beings. And they're running the whole show from behind the scenes. And they actually work through us as human beings. They don't just show up in the physical universe and say, okay, I'm going to, depopulate. No, they work through us. They work through us as humans. It's almost like the devil and the angel on your shoulder, the old cartoons. There would be an angel over here and a devil over here. And the devil gets you to do what it wants. And so they work through us. It's all the same agenda. It's the depopulation agenda. It's the whole one world order agenda. It's their agenda. And this is what they're pushing for. Yeah, I don't know where you want to go from there.
No, it's fine. So you mentioned about the souls needing to match the body, and I find that interesting too, because it would lead to the idea that we are there. There isn't like this human being factory that God has in some far off realm, that he just grabs a body, the generic body, and he's like, take this soul, slap it in there, ship it off, keep it going. Like, it's uniquely and wonderfully made in the image of God. And because it's uniquely and wonderfully made in the image of God, they're trying to match that uniqueness so it marries properly. That's what it sounds like you were saying to me.
Yeah. So these are not creative beings. They need us for that. I don't think they can just create something on their own. I think all they can do is this genetic manipulation to try to get God's creation and to try to trap our souls. So yeah, that does make sense. In about October 2022, I had never believed in reincarnation. And I am still in the camp that it might be a deception. But I'm also thinking it could also be. I think there is a lot of evidence for it. And so I can spend 2 or 3 minutes there, maybe. So let's just say reincarnation is real. And they still have the same goal. They have the goal of trapping the human soul. And so if reincarnation is real and they send us into these matching bodies, you have to have a genetic match for your soul. You get sent into the body and you live your life. And basically, we're just trying to pay our bills and get our kids to school, right? We're not really paying attention to what's happening. We're not waking up and realizing we're living in a clown show right now. Because we are busy trying to just live our lives. And so we die. If you've ever looked into any near-death experiences, you might start noticing an overlap between the abduction experience and the near-death experience. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. And I do want to say these beings are very manipulative, and they lie. And so I'm 100% open to this whole reincarnation thing being a complete manipulation. I'm also open to the possibility of it being true in some cases, maybe not all cases. So if you see the overlap between the white light and the beings, some people have even seen grace during a near-death experience. Many abductees, I don't know what the percentage is, have had a near-death experience and are also abductees. So if you just follow that through, I can look at all the tricks they have pulled on me, trying to get me to see something that wasn't there. If you go to a near-death experience and they're appearing, people have been asked, what do you want me to appear as? What makes you comfortable? And then they'll appear as your dead grandmother or, Jesus. And they walk you through the tunnel and they get you to your life review. And then they some people, they send back for a near-death experience, or they're being sent back. They're being told they haven't quite completed their mission and they're being sent back. But if you're not sent back, what happens? Well, people have pre-birth memories as well. And they go through this life review, and then they're told they have to do it again because, they did this wrong or that wrong. And so they need to go back, and they can do better next time. And they get sent back again. And so I'm not sure that is how the process is supposed to go. But if these things manipulate us in our everyday 3D life, what makes us think they cannot manipulate us in the afterlife? The abduction experience and the near-death experience are very similar. I have seen part of what I think could be the reincarnation process. And again, you probably don't believe in reincarnation. I didn't even entertain it as a possibility until October of last year. And again, I'm still open to it being a deception. But if they just have us circling around life after life, just trying to pay the bills, kind of living in the matrix system, and they can keep us distracted enough, I'll just start thinking out loud. Could it be? Because I believe faith is physics. I think faith actually opens a door of physics that gets us out of here, gets us out of this system. And so I'm kind of going to be going into a little bit of the Gnostic belief, which I don't buy into all of it 100%. But how many lifetimes could you maybe go around before you fall into this faith and you really open your eyes and you start realizing there's something more here, and perhaps start believing in God, and then go down the road of Christianity, and maybe you're funneled into some other religions. And if faith can set us free, well, they certainly don't want any of that, right? They don't want faith if that can set us free. And so do people get multiple chances around? I don't know. I hope they do. You know what? I hope there's reincarnation. I hope people get more than one chance to go around and to really wake up and realize, wait a minute, there's more going on in this world than what it appears. So that in itself is a soul trap, right? So they take the human soul, and if they're able to maybe hijack a bit of this process, they might not be in charge of this whole thing. But if people have seen grays during near-death experiences, that's something that should open our eyes, and we should stop and say, wait a minute, what's going on? We need to at least look at this. If they can hijack us and keep us going around in this system, they've now kind of trapped a soul. And hopefully they can keep it from waking up into coming to faith and creating this bridge of physics. So if they are now able to create this hybrid that, I don't know, could they live a couple hundred years? They've now really circumvented that process, and they've made it a lot easier on themselves. So now they get the soul into a body that's not even capable of faith. It's not even capable of searching for God. It can't. It's impossible. I'm not saying God can't light a fire in that person by any means, but through the natural process, it's going to become impossible. And now they've lengthened our lives. They put us into these biological robot-type beings that are living longer. And so to me, the entirety of their agenda is the soul trap. And so I'm always looking for how they're carrying it out. And I think reincarnation is a way. Again, it might be a deception. And this is another way of them trapping the human soul into these hybrid bodies. And I'll tell you what I saw during an abduction. And I've also received, I call them just concept pods. You might hear abductees call it a download. Mm-hmm. I've received just giant blocks of information. It's almost like a Dropbox of information, just plops right into my brain. At the moment that I receive the information, I am at 100% clarity, and it's like a light bulb, and I go, oh my gosh, this is exactly, now I understand. And then I have to kind of process the information and kind of try to put it into words. But I've also received these Dropbox downloads on this information. Anytime I receive something like that, it could be a lie. It could be misinformation, disinformation. It could just be part of their agenda, right? So I always want to look at it and see, what is the motive? What could they be trying to get at here? What do they want me to believe? So during this time last year, I was in an abduction experience. I was taken to a giant ship by a demon, by the way, a low-level demon. And I was standing at a hole. I called it a tunnel slide. Very difficult to explain, but they have these energy tunnels, these energy tubes. They're very similar to the tubes that you see at a pharmacy or at a bank, where they're sending things down the tubes and they can arrive at the other end, but they're made of energy. This tube is coated in a white foam. I know, strange detail, but then I come to find out later there's something called quantum foam. I ended up seeing it later on Twitter. And there is just a line of humans who are in zombie mode. And almost anytime I see other abductees on these ships, these humans are in zombie mode. They're just completely tuned out. They have no idea what's going on. And they are walking toward this tunnel. And it's a tunnel. You have to jump into the tunnel, and then it's almost like a slide. You jump into the tunnel, and it slides off into the universe somewhere. And they're just all zombied out. They're all jumping into this tunnel. And this demon is trying to get me to jump into the tunnel. And it's very strange because he never pushed me into the tunnel. It was something I had to choose. It was some type of weird permission. They're always looking for consent and permission for whatever reason. And I stood there at the tunnel and I just said, why would I jump into, why would I do that? I'm not doing that. Why would I jump into a tunnel? And they're all just jumping in, jumping in, jumping in. And I knew in that moment that there was something very serious going on, that this was not just a tunnel slide, that this was something very profound, and that something very profound was happening. It's a longer story, but I end up realizing that what I believe I'm seeing is part of this recycling process. Now, do they want me to believe this? And this is why I'm seeing it, because they're very manipulative. They can control our perception. Everyone has to know that right off the bat. I should have said that right off the bat. Or is this real? And, why are they trying to get me to jump into this tunnel slide? And so I start realizing that these are human souls and they're being sent somewhere. I don't know where. But my overall knowing is that this is part of this recycling process where these souls are just jumping into the tunnel and they're going off into who knows where. Why they're trying to get me to jump in the tunnel. And they tried to trick me a couple of times in a couple of different ways. I talked to a researcher about it later, and she said, I do not even know what would have happened to you if you had jumped into that tunnel, because it was almost a voluntary death type thing, which they've done to me a few times. Separate from that, maybe several weeks later, it might have even been a couple months later, I get one of these Dropbox downloads. And I am told, and this is not words, I'm told, or I now have the knowing, that these beings are sucking up human souls in some of these ships. They're harvesting souls. They're getting some type of energy from our souls because they don't have any. And that they're harvesting souls. And this is the dark part, Tony. This is the part that just almost destroyed me. And now coupling that with some of the near-death experience research, when you start seeing that some people have seen graves, it's just a big picture. I can lighten it up a little bit. I've also gotten Dropbox downloads on Christ. So there's that. That's probably actually what probably saved me from this. So yeah, where was I going with that? It's the ultimate soul trap. It's a soul trap is what it is. That's her agenda.
Yeah, I mean, this is all fascinating. The Dropbox on Christ, where would you say that came from? Because if it came from them, then can you trust it, right?
Yeah, no. So I have a few different things going on, obviously. So in my experience, positive beings, we call them angels in the Bible, messengers, they act in a different way than negative beings. For me, for sure. And I think this is probably general across the board.
Yeah.
And so I don't remember when it started. Actually, the minute I started writing down my dreams, I'm actually drawing shapes and I'm getting information. And this information is coming in giant blocks. I know. Are you running up against time? Because we have said nothing today.
No, you're fine. I have plenty of time. Let's just put it that way. I was actually, while you were just talking, I'm going to be honest with you. I was just about to text my brother to say, this is so good.
Oh my God. I wish I was being more, I don't know. It's just so all over the place. I wish I could just take all of the information and package it up very neatly into one little.
I'm going to be honest with you. Talking with people for as long as I've done, I think the growing trend is talking it out like this allows you to be able to, in the future, sort it out more organized. It's hard to do it without doing it this way. So I think that this recording here is going to be multi-purpose for you.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, and usually what I do is I write out some notes, which I do have some notes here, but it's never good just to read off of notes, right? So I can package it up all very neatly in notes and just organize it chronologically. And this happened, and then that happened, and then that happened. But yeah, it just doesn't go that way for a conversation.
Yeah.
Where was I going with that? Oh, so the downloads. So this is before I came across any research, ufology, anything. I didn't know anything was called the download, but I'm receiving these blocks of information. And many times I'm just able to, this is before I became fairly lucid. I'm just writing down, what's happening. I'm getting information and I'm getting like a geometric shape. It's kind of strange. And then when I started becoming very conscious and aware of what was happening, what was happening is in the very beginning of the night, and it was a few times a week, in the very beginning portion of the night, you go into, I think it's called a hypnagogic state. Or you might hear people say it's a mind awake, body asleep type state. And in that state, the astral body separates a little bit from the physical body. And so I'm receiving these giant download drop boxes of information, and it usually comes with a shape. While I'm receiving the information, I'm going, oh my gosh, well, of course. Oh, well, this makes so much sense. And it's almost like I'm going through a teaching of some type, and I'm just being fed information, and it all makes so much sense. And it's just incredible, very profound lessons that I'm learning. And then what would happen is I would get up, maybe to go to the bathroom or something, and kind of click back into my body. And the only thing I could grasp onto was the main concept and then the shape that came with the concept. And so I would write that down. I would write down the shape and then the main concept. In speaking with someone who has researched this a lot, the researcher told me that the astral body is able to receive psychic information very easily just through a psychic channel. But once the astral body clicks into the brain isn't necessarily able to process it. And so it kind of just disappears and goes away. There are people who say that information is in the subconscious mind, and it will be used when it needs to be used or accessed when it should be accessed at the right time. And so I'm receiving these downloads of information. And I have a list here somewhere of all the information I've gotten. And when I start realizing that these abductions are very negative, that there's a demonic aspect to it, that I'm now getting into the psychological torture, they're just doing unspeakable things. I actually just end up praying about it. And because I started thinking, wait a minute, these downloads that I'm getting, is this coming from the same place? And do I have to question, all of this information that's being plopped into my brain? And so I actually asked, please do not give me any more information during this time, because I just can't trust it. It started happening during the middle of the day. And so Can I trust it? I'm very skeptical of any information I get from anything in that realm. Very skeptical. But when I start getting downloads on Christ and the Matrix and how the act of that sacrifice and the physics that's involved in this, in its blood magic, that is actually a process of physics. It's very hard for me to articulate. But Christ's sacrifice, I believe, because I don't want to ever lead anyone astray on religion. Heaven forbid. I don't want to even be responsible for that or get involved in that in any way. I believe that sacrifice that Christ made was actually physics, and that it literally paid the price for everything we accumulate here, whether it's one lifetime or many lifetimes. And it's very difficult to explain, but it's physics. It's not just Christ died on the cross for your sins. No, it's actually a real process of physics that happened, I believe. This is the information I'm getting. And so I'd have to go back in my journals and look at all the information that I was getting about Christ. But I was being, so I'm in my dark night of the soul at this time. I'm being funneled right back, walked right back into Christianity. Like they might as well have taken me by the hand or shoved me down a chute. That's how blatant it was that I was being walked back down this path. It was crazy. And where was I going with that? Does anybody know?
No, it's okay.
Yeah. So I think I ended up being fairly comfortable. You know, when I look at the information and I look at the motive that could be behind the information, could there be deception here? What would be the motive for that deception? When I really look at it, I don't think so. But I'm always, anytime I'm getting information from a realm outside of just me and you talking in the physical realm, I'm always very suspicious of it. All of this channeling nonsense that's going on out there, all of this new age stuff, it's just all a pack of lies, is all it is. It's just all, they have, maybe a dozen ways that they're trying to lure us into this nonsense. And it's whatever works for the individual.
Well, I think that this is all very fascinating. So one thing you said a little bit ago, and I just I wrote it down here, so I don't know if it's going to make much sense now, but I did put down here that because you mentioned about what they give you as far as information goes, and how some of it's not lies, and it's interesting because I feel like I'm in a point right now where I do these conversations and I'm trying to kind of take it back to fundamentals at times. I got in the habit of not talking about things, assuming everybody's connecting the same dots I am because we've all been on this journey for so long. But in reality, there's a lot of people who haven't been on this journey as long as I have with the show. They haven't listened to all the episodes. And so I'm going to say something I feel is very elementary, but I'm going to say it anyways, just to get it out. There's a real likelihood that they are telling you truth on things, but it's in the process of manipulation to reinforce future lies, to give you truths for you to know is true, so that when they later bring in information like, well, this is true, therefore you can believe this part of it. And I don't have any context around it other than just to say truth to reinforce future lies, I think is a very real possibility that you're describing. And I guess maybe even based on that, in a sense, maybe a little bit is the reincarnation thing. I find it very interesting of what you were talking about. I'm not even sure. I think I'm following you on it. And so I'm going to almost try to repeat it to get confirmation that that's what you were trying to say. And maybe not, but it's fine either way. I've never thought about the reincarnation in this light. You were right when you said that you didn't think that I believe in reincarnation. I tend not to, or at least give it a whole lot of truth, if we're going to say truth. But the idea of reincarnation with this idea of them having technology to remove souls from body is very, very interesting. In my mind, if I can come to the idea and understanding that human beings have the ability to train themselves to do astral projection, and that obviously God could do it if he wanted to, because it sits in the palm of his hand. If these beings, entities, whatever they are, have technology and ability to do this, what are they doing with the souls? And are they putting them down chutes, recirculating these souls into new bodies? And what are these new bodies? Like, that's the thing. I'm like, all right, so are these natural birth bodies that are recirculating them into? Or, and if that's the case, then how is that happening with the creation process of an individual through God? But is there, to steal a term from my friend Joel, are they recirculating these souls into meat sacks that they have created to be these hybrid beings? Is that kind of what you were saying?
That is what I'm saying. Yeah. So to get back to your previous point, this is what they do. They tell a lot of truth with their lies. I mean, that's the most effective lies, when you're using truth in the lie, right? So you could be absolutely right. And that's why I always remain suspicious of any information I get from this other realm. I do believe there are positive beings out there. We call them angels. I was literally walked back to Christianity with this information. And so I can't see that as, I mean, it's always possible because they are master manipulators, that could be a deception, but that certainly didn't end well for them, for me. I do believe I was in an absolute battle for my soul, and that I had to make a choice, them or not them, and anti them. And so with this information, so while this stuff was happening to me, I'm being handed this information and I'm being walked right back into Christianity. And so could it be them using, truth to reinforce their lies at some point, which is absolutely possible? Yes. What do they gain from that? Except for, like you said, then they can say, well, we told you these truths, so now you're going to believe this too.
Trust.
It's true. Trust. 100%. And I will always remain open to that. I remain open to every single thing I've seen is deception and manipulation. Although it's also very interesting that a lot of what I have seen, and some of it that sounds like nonsense, the more silly things that have happened, I have read in the abduction research later by people who have been regressed past their screen memories into what actually happened. You will have abductees who believe, I'm still rambling at this point. So let's say that you're frozen by a shadow being, and the abductee only remembers being frozen and paralyzed. And what has actually happened is that is the beginning of an abduction event, and the rest of that memory is erased. And through a very good regressionist, those people can recover what actually happened. And in fact, what happened was they were taken into a ship and had procedures done on them. But the only thing they remember is being paralyzed by a shadow being. And so if the regressionist is not very good, they actually run up against screen memories, is what they're called. And that's just an implanted memory that actually never happened. And a lot of times that will involve some type of spiritual experience. A lot of abductees come away with psychic powers and, feeling very special, because it's almost like we get activated by these abductions. I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg. But so it's very difficult to get through these screen memories. So first you have your conscious memory, and then you have the screen memory, and then you have what actually happened. And much of what has happened to me is conscious recall. When I first started talking to researchers, I would say, this is what happened. That's probably a screen memory. That's probably not what happened. And then months later, I would read in the abduction research someone where that exact same thing happened to them, and that memory was retrieved under hypnosis. And so I started looking at my stuff going, okay, I can kind of count on a lot of what is going on. I actually started getting very good at recognizing overlay, and because the brain will try to fill in anything it doesn't understand. And so I can look around and go, okay, is that real, or am I trying to fill that in because it's something that I can't comprehend? And so this has been a very long process for me, and many, many experiences is the only thing that has allowed me to kind of put all these pieces together. I think a lot of abductees remember 1 or 5 experiences. They don't remember a lot of experiences until they go through this regression and they realize what's actually happening. So it's entirely possible that every last one of my contacts is negative. But it's also possible in my perception and my belief that I've had the angel and the devil on each shoulder. So many things have happened where I was literally hand walked back to my religion. That can't be good for them. So, but in there, could I have been fed some lies like reincarnation, and things like that sound kind of more new age, because they do use the new age principles to suck you into this stuff, by the way. So I remain open to that.
Let me ask you a question on this. So being walked back into your faith, is it possible that that process happened because of, or the intervention of the good entities that, what you described, and I feel like you're describing as angels. So there's these warring fractions, and there is God's angels still warring on our behalf. Is this walking back into the faith process something that you believe happened because of angels interceding on your behalf? I guess maybe I'm not clear. Maybe you haven't even give us the details as to what it was that walked you back into this faith.
Okay, so that's a good question, and hopefully I remember it. So I mentioned earlier, I think this was a process that I had to go through, and I actually had to make my own choice. And this goes completely against Calvinism, by the way, which I never thought it would go against. I think that I was being lured into the dark side. I had gone through that dark night of the soul. I had disconnected from Christianity. I had questioned everything I had ever been taught. I was questioning my faith. Completely kind of disconnected from it. I think I had to make my own personal choice. And after I made that personal choice, I started getting all of this information. And I would really have to go look at my journals and look at the dates to say that with certainty. But the day I had written a blog on my website, first of all, I created that website because I was being punished for speaking out against this alien agenda. And the night I decided I was creating that website, it was a literally in your face. If this is what you're going to do, this is what I'm going to do, because I only have so much power, right? So I created the website that I created during this whole time. So I'm all over the place. Things have to make sense for me. Things have to be logical. They have to make sense. And even though this is very science fiction and very supernatural, I've come to understand that this is actually all just physics that we don't understand. Everything we believe is supernatural and magic, it's going to be physics that we just haven't wrapped our mind around. And our scientists have put us in these tiny little boxes. And they say, well, if it goes against these laws of physics, it didn't happen, or it's not real, or it happened in your head. And they're going to have to end up eating crow on that, because it's all physics. And so because things have to make sense to me, I had to make sense of what was happening. Why are they able? How can these things take my soul out of my body? And by the way, I'll throw another wrench into it. Our own military industrial complex has the ability to do the very same thing. And that's a whole other rabbit hole. I had to make sense of what was happening. I had to make sense of why it was happening. I had to make sense of their agenda. And it just has to make sense to me. It can't just be, oh, go believe in this. No, it has to make sense. And so I was really working out all these things that had to make sense. I'd have to look at the dates to see when I was getting these downloads. This is physics. That price that he paid on the cross, it was physics. If you believe in reincarnation, that it does make sense. So, maybe that is a deception. That's fine. But because I'm open to all of this being deception. But once I had made my own conscious decision, and I actually wrote a blog on my website, and it says, I was born a Christian, something like that. I'll always be a Christian, something like that. The minute I made that choice, and I have looked up these dates, was the minute the punishments kicked in, was when they ramped it up. I was dealing with these demonic reptilian entities. I was involved in rituals. There's so many rabbit holes to go down. I don't know where you want to go. But once I made that conscious choice and I realized this actually all does make sense. These are not aliens. This is spiritual warfare. This is a cosmic battle for the soul of man. Once it all really fit in and really made sense, and I had to make my own conscious choice, I believe, to choose Christianity. And I just think I have a little bit of a bigger perspective on it now than I did. And I wrote that blog. That's when the handholding came. It was almost like I had to make that conscious decision on my own without any help. Now, I'm not saying I didn't get help, because I don't know, what help could have been happening behind the scenes. I'm just talking about, conscious knowing of help. So hopefully that answered your question.
Sure. You have so much information, and what I find so interesting about this is that this isn't like you've been doing this for decades, studying and researching, and I'm now Dr. Fringe and I know everything, and just listen to me, children, huddle around the X space. You know what I mean? I think it's fascinating that this is all very recent in your life, that you've been looking into it, connecting dots. And I feel like we're getting a window into a very current event, detailed life of this stuff, which is often not the case. Often we hear people saying, I've been dealing with this as a child and it's stopped, or it's ongoing, but most of the details are from years ago. This is like very current event revelation and jam-packed information. And I understand why it is difficult to navigate these waters right now. I think in 10 years from now, it will be like a clockwork for you, as far as being able to take people up to where you're at. And I don't think you probably will never feel like you completed the circuit and you're like, I get it. I understand it all now. I've been in those situations in the last 7 years where I'm like, I think I really understand where this is all going. And all of a sudden, like, nope, that doesn't work. Like even just the mere, this is small, minute, but what you said today about the reincarnation for the first time. And I've never discredited people when they talk about reincarnation, because at the end of the day, who am I? I don't know. But for me, the first time in my entire life has been today when you brought up the reincarnation and how you talked about it. I was like, that could be a pathway for me personally to understanding this. And so I got to pull at that thread now. And so my circle is definitely not complete at all. And I think that I think you're on the beginning stages of this journey, to be honest with you. And I think we're all very privileged to be able to follow along that journey with you. There's so much that we could talk about. The My Labs, the MK Ultra stuff. We barely touched on that. You mentioned about the military industrial complex, polling soul, like all this stuff. Like I feel like I could talk to you for hours. I don't want to drag this on because I think what could be done here is another recording session at another time here, because this is just so complex. My fear in doing that is that I don't want to retread things, just recapping in the sense, because we've been kind of talking about all this stuff. So I think if you're willing to do another recording session with me, I think I would want to make sure I have like a list of things we've already covered, maybe things that we could dive deeper into, because I feel like there's definitely room to talk more about like the MyLab stuff and the MK Ultra stuff. And you even mentioned about, you passively mentioned a few minutes ago about being involved in rituals after you making that decision. I'm very interested in that. I think there is a real spiritual element to all this stuff. And I think you're starting to, I think you have come to a lot of these conclusions as well. And I find it reassuring for me as somebody who I don't think I've ever been abducted. I don't know, I guess, for certain. But for me on this side of the things where I'm collecting stories, to hear you coming to a lot of the same conclusions that I've come to through, this is probably the wrong way of saying it, but living vicariously through others, it's reassuring that, you know, we're kind of on the same path here. So I'm looking at all my notes. I've been jotting down as you were saying things. And one thing I do want to bring up, and maybe that we can kind of, I don't want to say end because who knows where this is going to go. But you bring up this idea of how you were waking up and it was like, it was real. You know, it's not like this dream state. It's real. From your understanding, what is this process of waking up? What was going on before the wake up into this real reality? And is this real reality that you're waking up into, is it this reality or is it another realm that you were taken into? Because, I mean, you talked about portals a couple times earlier in the conversation, and that's a topic that comes up on the show a lot. Let me just get this out of the way. We talk about portals a lot on the show. It's a hot button thing. People enjoy it, the idea of portals. But portals, in my opinion, are literal just doors. And we're sitting around getting excited about doors, guys. Like I think it's because we're like, where is the door? This door that we can't fathom and see. But the reality is these portals are just doors, and we tend to get excited about the door instead of the content on the other side of the door. And so is it something like that where you're in this realm, say you're sleeping, let's keep it simple because I know sometimes you said it happened in the middle of the day, but let's say you're sleeping. Is it that they're taking you physically through a portal door into another realm? How do you see all that?
No, so a couple of different things can happen. So they can actually take your physical body and remove it from the physical environment into quite another real physical environment. And then a lot of times they're only taking the astral body and the consciousness, and they're actually putting it into another body. We can start going down the clone road if you'd like or not. Which, by the way, I never believed in any of this stuff. I just thought this was all conspiracy theories. I was very, straight-laced until
Welcome to the dark
mother
side.
wanted to kill me because I was a reptilian. And even that, I really didn't buy into any of that until much later in my life. Okay, so they can take the physical body. Now this is going to get really weird. I don't know where to go with this. So they can take the physical body. They obviously have a very physical agenda and they're making physical hybrids. But they can also take just the astral body and the consciousness and put it into another body. Here's where it gets really weird. There have been times when I have known with a degree of certainty, but not 100% certainty, that my physical body was gone from the location. If my clothes are not on properly, if my pants are on backwards, there was a time when I was sleeping with this helmet that I would put it on in this exact right way. I had a scarf that I put on over the helmet that had an emblem on it. I was very careful about it. I checked it every night. I had a camera in the bedroom. I mean, this was an extensive process. I go to sleep. Right before I'm about to fall asleep, my motion sensor camera loses Wi-Fi, and it sends me a notification that it has lost Wi-Fi. And I'm thinking, oh, geez. So not almost always, but there are times when I know they're coming. I know it's going to happen. They turn a very high-pitched frequency on in my head, and I will get images sent into my head, and this is going to start really sounding even more wacky than I already do. The Wi-Fi camera goes off. And at this point, I'm wearing this helmet to sleep. And I'm thinking, it's okay. I've got the helmet on. It's been fairly successful. And I was actually deluding myself for quite some time with this helmet on. By the way, it had become kind of a comfort item. And I said, that's okay. I'm going to go to sleep anyway. And this is a very strange mind control. If you thought someone was about to break into your house, would you go to sleep? Absolutely not. You would not go to sleep. You would get up. By the way, I sleep with a Glock with 333 round magazines right next to my bedside table with a flashlight. I mean, I'm ready to go. My house is loaded for bear. My husband is savage. You would not want to come across him in a dark alley, either armed or unarmed. But no, that's not what I do. I go ahead and go to sleep, which makes no sense. And so I go to sleep. I wake up in the morning. My only perception during that night is that my mind was locked into a portal. Now, there's different kinds of portals that I've experienced. In this case, all I could see was a black and white, like a fuzzy screen. So my brain is in this fuzzy screen all night. I wake up in the morning and I just knew something was wrong. And I thought, oh my gosh, they got me. But I have no memories, no conscious memories whatsoever of being abducted. And this is where it can get very convoluted. So I sit up and I know something's wrong. And I look at my helmet and my scarf is on upside down. I have a bloody nose, and I'd have to look at my journal to see. I think there was one or two other things that happened. And so while my mind was put somewhere, I don't know where, and my perception was that it was a portal, they had done something with my physical body. So the camera turned off, my scarf is on backwards, I have a bloody nose, and I think something else had happened. So I now know something physical happened. Something took my helmet off my head, and when they re-put it on, they put it on upside down. Now, this will happen a lot with physical abductions, with abductees. I have had my pants on backwards. You could wake up in a different place. When I was a kid, I used to just wake up in different places, never outside in a field or anything, like I've heard some people say, but some different places in the house, outside of the bed, in the hallway, whatever. So that is something physical that happened, but I have no memory of it. I have no idea what happened during that time because my mind is somewhere else. I don't know where in this portal. Then they can take your astral body and put it into other bodies. I have come back, and this will get into the whole myelabs thing. It's happening there. I have come back from a myelab with a degree of certainty that my physical body never left the bed, where I think it was just my astral body and consciousness that was transferred. Yet, my physical body has bruises on it. And so, what are they able to do to that astral body while it's in some other body, different bodies, that can bring bruises back to my physical body? So the astral body, the soul, and the consciousness, there's a connection. And the things that they can do to that, our energy, our souls, our consciousness, our astral bodies, what continues on outside of our physical body, has an effect on our physical body. And this is something that I really struggled with. For the longest time, I could have bruises, really deep scratches. I've had, during the middle of the day, by the way, 3 tiny puncture wounds all in a row. But my perception was that my physical body never left the physical environment. My perception is that I could feel when they suck my soul out of my body. I can feel it. And I usually feel it either coming or going. So I can take an assessment, and I kind of learned to do this just from speaking to researchers. Was this a physical occurrence or not? And I will venture to say that most abductees have not had enough experience to even know the difference. Most abductees will swear their physical body was gone. And I can't say otherwise because they have a very physical agenda. They're making real hybrids. They need physical eggs. They physically take people. The researcher David Jacobs believed all abductions were physical. I would have also believed that if it weren't so many times of me being able to stop and kind of just take an assessment as to what was going on. So to get back to the portals, I have had occasion, and this is a memory that was not 100% consciousness. I was maybe at 75%. I was in a ship and I was being taught how to jump time. And there were these, I call portals. And I think people maybe have different definitions of what these things are, because you could see a shimmering, in the 3D, and it'll shimmer and something can pop through. And people can call those portals too. So I think there's just a lot of definitions of portals. So I was being taught, and I don't have a lot of concrete details on this. I was being taught how to jump through what I was perceiving as a painting portal, but it looked like a painting. And I was being taught how to jump through these paintings into a different time. And that's a whole other thing. Time is not linear like we think it is. And these beings, I do believe, have a way to exist outside of our time, because they have a way of working time when you're in that environment. And so that's my experience with portals, is literally jumping through. I believe there were 3 different paintings of different scenes, of different times, different locations, that I was jumping through to get to that location and then getting back. And separate from that, my husband has actually had this really interesting thing where he was shown that time is, and I was shown this too, that time is, they're parallel. Time is parallel. And so if you think of time like a book, you can be here in the middle reading the book, but you can flip to the beginning of the book and you could flip to the end of the book. It's not linear. And so in order to jump time, it's a parallel jump. So you jump parallel. That's a whole other thing. I don't know how I got on that. But that will cover my experience with portals. So in 2 different ways, it was my perception that my brain was in a portal with this black and white screen. And then in another time, I saw it as a painting that I was actually jumping through into this painting and then coming back and then doing it in another painting and then in another painting.
Wow. So you were being shown how to time travel, essentially.
Yes. I was being shown how to time travel. I get shown lots of things. I've been shown how to fly spaceships. And so
oh my gosh,
you can go to so many places, Tony.
We are
you have
working
no idea.
on the 3rd hour and you're bringing us up. You're killing me.
And I haven't really said a single thing yet because it's been so all over the place. I need to do my own recording of my own self and my story so I can put it in chronological order, and then I just push the button. Okay, this is what happens. There are many very fascinating things going on. Even with the My Labs, my demonic rituals were My Labs rituals. They were My Labs. These creatures call me by a number.
Oh my gosh.
They call me by a number. Yeah. And aliens don't call you by a number, by the way. But these are reptilians that are possessed by demons, and they call me by a number. And there you go.
Okay. So unless you just had a terrible time, I am telling you, I absolutely need to have a part 2 at least with you at some point. Maybe we can make it for the members or something. I don't know. This is wild. So, all right, we've said My Labs a lot on this, and I just want to let people know, because I was in this camp for a long time. People would say My Lab, My Lab. I'm like, what is a My Lab? Like, what are you guys talking about? Let me just define it for you. Military intelligence laboratories. Okay, so that's what we're talking about when we say My Lab. And when you say MK Ultra and My Lab now people can start connecting dots. Okay, well, you know what MK Ultra is? Government, military, got it. Okay. So I kind of want to just say thank you for all this information that you've been able to share with us and just, talk. And I think this was a really fun time for me. I know that. And so hopefully it was a good time for everybody else to hear your experiences in a very
all over this way.
No, but a real way. Like I think that this is this kind of conversation, I think, is very consumable for people, to be honest with you. It's not it's not the only way, right? But I think this was very consumable for people because it's going to leave them with a lot of questions, like I have for sure. And every question I present to you leads to 10 more. And that's
at
what
least.
it's just, this is wild. I want to bounce off this idea though, waking up with bruises, that in a sense can be relayed to, first of all, I have talked with people who have intimate knowledge of people dying because they've died in the other on the other side. They killed there, dead here kind of thing.
They've tried to get me, maybe there have been 3 times or so where I have known beyond a shadow of a doubt that the tunnel was one of them. There was another time they tried to get my soul into a metallic robot. And you guys, I want everybody to know I know how incredibly insane all of this sounds. I feel like I've been living in a movie.
Yeah.
And I haven't even, I have not even gone to some places yet. I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt if they were able to get my soul into this, it was a metallic robot alien thing, that was not recoverable. It was really weird. And there was then another time I'd have to check my journal for that other time. But there have been, I think, 3 times that I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt. And there's this weird type of consent that is involved. They didn't shove me down that tunnel. They wanted me to go down the tunnel. I 100% believe what you're saying. I'm in touch with a researcher who believes with 100% certainty that they do have the ability to kill us on the other side. And then we get into that whole, other ball game of what power do they have on the other side? What power, if they can deceive us on this side, why couldn't they deceive us on the other side and try to lure us into a place we're not supposed to go, which could be the reincarnation loop? So not only one thing has to be true, right? There could be a process by which they deceive some people or are able to deceive some people, and they get sent to this reincarnation process. It doesn't mean reincarnation is true for everyone, and it doesn't mean that everything that is said about reincarnation is true.
Yes.
But when you start seeing the involvement in what you just said, that you know someone who's been killed on the other side that resulted in a physical death, that means they have some power on the other side to affect us in reality. And
yes.
that's a very profound thought, in my opinion.
It is a paradigm shifting thing for what we think we know about reality, what we think we know about our spiritual existences, and how intertwined it all is. And we think we know, but we have no idea.
No.
And it kind of circling back to what you said earlier, how faith seems to break that hold. It's very interesting how that all works. This is all very legalistic. They when you're talking about the giving permission, it seems to me like it's all very legalistic. They know what they have rights to. They know what they don't have rights to. They will try to get you to give them the rights to the things they don't have rights to. Going back to Pastor Dave Bryan that I was talking about earlier, these entities believed they had rights to his adopted daughter, who was Anton LaVey's daughter at one time, until she legally changed her name. They legally adopted her. They legally brought her into the family of Christ, and they lost the rights that they thought they had at one time because they did. And so it to me, this game is complex, and if you don't know the rules, you'll be left very confused. And I think a lot of us are very confused.
And we don't know the rules. We don't know the rules. And they will also bend the rules, which is so weird. Why are they always trying to get permission if they'll steal it from you? If they can't get it from you, they'll steal it. They consider Delta sleep permission. When you go to sleep at night and you're in Delta sleep, it's permission because you're being naive and gullible by letting yourself fall asleep without a guardian. It's literally, they will go to any, to extraordinary efforts to get permission. It's very, very strange. There are some laws to this universe that we don't understand. We're certainly not taught them in Christianity, I can tell you that. And that is from me coming all the way back around, back to the faith, by the way, even though I feel extremely betrayed by it.
You and I can swap stories on that. The audience wasn't privy to this really a whole lot during the recording of my podcast over the years. I've never walked away from the faith, but I felt very betrayed by the church in general, because I was waking up to the realization of how supernatural my existence was. And I was taught to believe that Jesus, cupcakes, dancing in a field, holding his hand was all I needed to know. And
Exactly.
there was so much more to it. And I felt neglected. For me, was neglected. I felt like spiritually I was neglected. And what I came to understand is that those that I felt like I was spiritually neglected by were neglected themselves. They just didn't know it. And I was just like, I started finding that I was hurting myself by isolating myself from the brotherhood, the Christianity, the brotherhood that exists there. And I just needed to find my tribe that maybe didn't understand things the way I understood it, or was totally into everything that I talk about, but was willing to hold the conversation and understand that the Bible, though I believe is true, I don't believe is an all-encompassing history book of all time that ever existed. And there's a lot of things that have happened that we just don't know about, because I think the Bible is geared towards the salvation of humanity through Christ. And there's a whole history that went into leading up to those moments that we don't know. And there's just rules of engagement. And anyways, I could ramble on and on with you, but you said about the going to sleep and that itself. Would you suggest, because I mean, when you said that, I was like, oh, that gives a whole other level of importance to prayers before bedtime, praying that God sends his guardian angels. Maybe some reinforcements tonight, God. Send your angels to protect me, my family, my children, protect our minds as we sleep, in this vulnerable state. Is that kind of like a conclusion you've come to as well?
Yeah, I do it every night, sometimes more than once a day too. Yeah, every single night before I go to bed. And so this is a whole other rabbit hole, but I've spent this entire last year trying to stop these abductions in many different ways. A lot of prayer. I'm actually going for deliverance in April, because if there's any ties that can be cut, I'm definitely going to cut them. My mom is going as well. My mom is going through a very extremely hard time right now. Very demonic attacks on her. Where was I going with this? So yeah, prayers for certain. It's a whole other long story.
Yeah.
So before we wrap up, what I would like to say today is this topic is going to be going mainstream any minute. I mean, you're already seeing a lot about it in the news. You've got the whole topic of disclosure, which we haven't even touched on. Which side is pushing for disclosure? It's the good side or the negative side? Because I do believe there's at least two sides here. People are going to, at some point, be talking about this stuff around the dinner table. And what I would like to say to your audience, because it's quite a bit bigger than mine, which I'm actually very grateful for today, is keep an open mind as to what these things are. The narrative that is acceptable, the acceptable narrative in ufology, and amongst at least 85%, it's about 85% of abductees as well, is that these beings are here to upgrade our consciousness. You're going to hear, they're here to ascend us to 5D. They're here to take us to the new earth. You hear a lot of channelers talking, the Dolores Cannon stuff. And not only are they here to upgrade our consciousness, but they're here to upgrade our bodies. And so these beings are convinced, the insiders, at least some insiders, that this is a good thing. This is for us. This is humanity 2.0. We, are headed for this biological AI type upgrade to the human. And at the same time, our consciousness is being upgraded as well. And so this is the message. So these are aliens, extraterrestrials from outer space. They're here to upgrade us and to ascend us into the next, evolutionary process, whatever it is. And I just ask that your audience just keeps an open mind. And even if it's 5 years from now, they remember the crazy lady who came on to Tony's show and said, these are not our space brothers. Don't fall for any of this. It's very strange. And I got into some New Age practices during this time, a whole other topic. It's very strange that they use the New Age practices to hijack us. And it is absolutely permission. And this is what I noticed just over my last couple of years. Is I won't go into the story, but these New Age practices of meditation, getting into channeling, any remote viewing, anything like that, it's all permission. And it's a very strange permission. And when I first looked at this, I thought it was very silly. Like, how could a New Age practice give permission to anything? Well, I can just tell you the short story is it is permission. Anytime you're opening up your so-called consciousness to try to exercise our own inherent psychic abilities, you're actually, it's like moths to a flame. You're actually turning on a light in the etheric realm, and they will just come for you. And they will come for you with lies. That you're special, that they are very often acting as guides, as spirit guides. You're going to have mediums, they're talking to their spirit guides. A lot of this stuff is filled with truth. I have, some of them are charlatans and they're lying, but some of them are actually in contact and they will give you some truth. There's an abductee named Ted Rice who was a psychic medium for his entire life. And he was giving true and real information to his clients and believed he was helping humanity. He ends up, through some circumstances, realizing that, I think all three of his so-called guides, at least one of them was a reptilian that had raped him as a child. These are, and this is going to go back to the whole thing with the afterlife. They come in disguise. They will show you, whatever being. They will show you Jesus. They will show you Mary. They will show you any type of religious being to get you to believe them. So when this topic goes mainstream, just keep an open mind as to whether these are actually aliens and actually our space brothers here to help us and to upgrade humanity. And this is a good thing that we're going to get upgraded with this hybrid breeding program. This is for us and it's essential for us. Just keep an open mind that there's a whole other side of this story and that there's a lot of deception and manipulation involved, and they may not be what they're trying to appear as.
Well, that's the show, everybody. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you did enjoy the show, share the show with your friends. That's the best thing you can do to help the show grow. Share the show. Speaking of sharing the show, this is the very first microphone I started the show with that you shared all those years. I bought this microphone when I was in college and it was sitting in storage. And when I started the podcast, I whipped the bad boy out, started using it. And if you're on YouTube, you can't actually hear episode 1. It's not on there. So if you want to hear episode 1, you have to listen to the podcast feed. But nevertheless, this is what you're listening to on episode 1 through probably episode 100 something. And this is an M Audio Nova. They don't even make these bad boys anymore. And the audio was trash. And that's probably why. So you can thank this microphone for it, not me. All right, friends. I just wanted to share that with you. I look at it a lot and it brings a lot of memories my way. I appreciate it. That's why it sits around here, because I always want to remember where we came from. So M Audio Nova, don't get it. All right. Until next Tuesday, stay safe, take care, and remember, the truth will set you free.
Push me down and I'll go higher. Push me down and I'll go higher.